Good afternoon, everyone. On behalf of the entire IPDAY team and the Florida Department of Education, we welcome you to IPDAY's Webinar Wednesdays. I'm June Rawl, and I'm glad all of you were able to join us today for our webinar titled Connecting Math to Life Beyond the Classroom. We're happy to note that many of you are watching this webinar as a team. If you send us the list of names of those in attendance, we can upload the activity to their personalized portal account. Remember, this portal account is a vital part of the website. It's unique to you. It's where your activity history lives, like the events you've attended, the webinars you've watched, the e-trainings you've completed, and it provides easy access to training documents that are related to the workshops that you've attended. I hope you are taking advantage of the unique features the portal can provide for you. Have you tried the option to export the files as a PDF and email it to your local provider? It's easy. Just ask one of your colleagues or just send us an email. For today's webinar, I invited Harold Gertner to facilitate. Harold is the Pathways to Brighter Future Coordinator at Santa Fe's Adult Education, Career Placement, and Learning Specialist. He will share a variety of practical application tools with us today. Tools designed to hone in on connecting math to the real world and other content areas. I'm sure you'll find these tools resourceful and useful as you plan and design lessons that will help your students succeed. So stay engaged with IPDAY. We would love to hear from you. Our goal is to keep you informed of the latest development and resources to prepare your students for success in career and post-secondary education. Make sure to check out the event calendar. There's lots of great face-to-face trainings coming your way. So at this point, Harold, I'm going to turn it over to you and we will start the webinar. Thank you.
All right, great. Thanks so much, June, and thanks for the warm welcome. I'm sure happy to be a part of IPDAY and this webinar training. This topic is something I've wanted to get into for a while. I'm not the most math-heavy of students or scholars. I did my math in college and my math to get through a liberal arts grad school humanities program, but then I've never really, I'm not really your typical mathy teacher, and I think in a lot of ways that's given me some advantages to making some connections with the students from a similar perspective where they may be coming from, not being the most mathy of people themselves. But as we get further into this, I would love it if you would share some questions. This is my first webinar, and I'm usually very excited to look at your faces and interact directly in the class and kind of have our discussion or lecture shift a little bit based on questions you might have or things such as that. So if you do have some questions, you cannot like raise your hand and sign in and speak your questions, but if you type them in, June and I will both be trying to check that regularly and make sure we get, if not all of them answered, at least the majority of them answered. And I think June mentioned this, but just to reiterate, this will be recorded and available for you to access anytime you would like through that amazing IPDAY website with all those other fun things June was talking about. They're available for you as well. So again, thanks for tuning in, and let's talk a little bit more about math and how we can make it relate to the classroom for our students. So I like to put a lot of cartoons in my webinars and my PowerPoints, and they kind of make it fun for us to know what we're talking about. I think we've heard this attitude from many students before. You know, this guy here, I start every song by counting 1, 2, 3, 4 because it reminds me of math, and math depresses me, and that helps me sing the blues. Well, we have a lot of students that tend to be depressed by math and wish they could just sing the blues instead of come to math class. But we have to help them figure out how to make a connection beyond the math class and realize that this, what they're learning really does connect to their real world and will help them beyond just the next math class or the GED test or to get into whatever sciences they're going into or something like that. So often we hear, why do I have to learn this? When will I ever use this? Or we hear things like people say, I'm not good at math, or I can't do math, or I don't like math. Well, we're going to talk about some ways to hopefully make your students connect a little bit more and kind of get over some of those hangups today. So to that end, whoops, switch my page. There we go. To begin that, a great way to start is to begin breaking down that mindset that they have in their language. We got to move from a growth into a growth mindset from a fixed mindset. And this is something that we could talk about for an entire webinar. But it's a crucial point here for getting people more open to learning math and more excited about being in the math classroom. Often the students that say, I can't do math, have been told before that they can't do math, or have been told before that they're not good at math, or that they don't have that natural talent to do math, when in reality they just can't do the problem yet, or they haven't learned how to do math properly yet. And just adding that little yet to some of our sentences can really open them up to the fact that they can achieve in their math classrooms, and that it's not something they can't do, it's just something they haven't done. Often I talk to students about the fact that your brain is like any other muscle in your body, and that you've got to work it out to grow it. And we kind of know that's obvious, but if you really start talking to them about going to the gym, they realize that as I lift as I lift more weights, I can lift more weights. And that's the same idea with the growth mindset in your mind. And as I do more math, I can do more math or do harder math. And so it's that same idea of just accepting that your mind can change over time and learn more, that it's not just fixed, that you're not just an English person, or you're not just a non-math person, or whatever. And we have this kind of nice graphic again here, the official seesaw of mindset, the growth mindset versus the fixed mindset. On one side, we say, my brain is built to learn, and I can work harder. And when I work hard and push out of my comfort zone, I learn more. And I can learn or overcome anything that I put that hard work to, because my brain can grow and learn. Versus the fixed mindset of, I'm not a math person. There's other people who are good at math. How lucky for them. Or, there's nothing I can do about it. Oh, well, it's just where I am. That kind of defeatist mindset will never, the students will never let themselves succeed if they come in with that kind of mindset. So this is the first step to sort of kind of changing the language of the math room, is embracing this growth mindset. The other thing we need to do in terms of embracing language is connect our language in the math room to outside the math classroom, and to the world that students actually confront and operate in and deal with every day. Quite often, I think students take a term that they're given in a context like a math class and embrace it like a proper noun, and don't really know that there's any meaning behind it. So what I'm saying here in my little example, for a non-mathy example, as I like to say, many students have heard of a Chevy Impala. It's a type of car. They know the car. They know the name of the car. They do not, however, know what an Impala is. And to them, it's just another name for a car. Like I say here, it could be Joe, it could be Sue, it could be Bill, it could be a random group of letters that is totally made up, but it's just a proper name for that type of car. But if you tell them, no, this is actually the name of a fast animal, they make the connection then to the idea that, oh, the car goes fast, and so this fast animal, and they see why someone chose that and why they named the car that. It kind of makes sense for them at a better level, a deeper level. And so we need to try and make these same kinds of connections with the language of math, and the proper nouns of math, if you will. So I want you to start to think of some similar examples or things you may have encountered. And here on our next page, we're actually going to do a short exercise. If you have some scratch paper in front of you, I'd like you to just quickly give a short definition of these words we have here: a quarter, a half, acute, volume, inequality, and fraction. And quick definition, and then a quick note to yourself about maybe the situation where you encounter these words the most, or the context where you see these words most regularly. Um, Obviously, we're in a math webinar, so many of y'all are going to jump to say, oh, well, I've seen them in math class. Think of a connection beyond the math class where you might have run into these words. And I'm going to give you a few seconds to jot your notes down. And if anybody would like to share a few of their ideas in the question and answer area, that would be great. All right, excellent. So some little Jeopardy music. I hope you enjoy it there. I just realized also I'm getting some messages in the webinar chat that I didn't notice before. So let me look here real quick. Yeah, I agree. Math stinks. That's what I hear. I was never good at math. A common refrain. Exactly. Excellent. Quarter half can be used in sports context. Very good. People talking about acute meaning sharp, or volume having 3 dimensions, inequality meaning imbalance, a fraction is something less than 1, a quarter, someone put down a fourth of a dollar. These are all great ideas and great starts. This is kind of where the discussion might go with some students, throwing out some of these ideas. And a quarter is an excellent one to start with. Some of our students immediately for a connection outside of the math room might jump to sports. And the first quarter of the football game, such and such happened. The last quarter, the team who was leading flip-flopped, or it might have that connection. And you can immediately talk to them about, well, okay, how many quarters are there in that football game? Oh, there's 4 of them. Excellent. Well, how many quarters are there in, if we write it out like 1/4, that's 1 of the 4. So let's do the third quarter was 3 of the 4. So now we're making fractions that are 3/4 or 3/4, and actually how we speak it. And then we can go on further from there, and we'll kind of get a little more into a quarter here in a second. The same can be true with halves. Again, a half of a game, a half of a half-pound burger. Some of our students might work at McDonald's in places, and they serve 2 quarter-pound burgers, and you got a half a pound burger. Those kinds of connections can be made. Half a dollar, all kinds of things like that. Acute, I saw someone put sharp. That's excellent. I like to talk to students from acute in terms of maybe the only context outside of the math classroom they've heard that is in a health situation. Either they had a pain, or someone, like they went to the hospital with someone who had a pain in their side, and the doctor asked them, was it an acute pain? Was it sharp and pointed and to this one area, or was it generalized throughout their stomach or something? And with that, you get the idea that it's sharp and pointed, and so you can immediately make a connection to the idea that your acute angle has a sharp, pointy end. Now, granted, your 89-degree acute angle is going to have a less sharp, pointy end, but use a tiny angle to push your point home a little bit better. Now we can also talk about volume comes up. There's all sorts of ways to get into volume. Typically, we're used to, if the standard geometry class, we go perimeter, area, and then, now we've made a box that we can fill, so we have to talk about volume. And that's good. Students have understand how to package things before. They've seen that, and that's a pretty common thing. But we can also talk about how volume relates to area, or relates to surface area, in terms of the bigger the volume, the greater the surface area of the shape. And in general, when you're kind of just starting into it, now granted, I know there are shapes that this isn't always true, but in general, as the floor area increases, your volume's probably going to increase too, as long as you keep your side walls the same side or something. But at least to intro into the idea, you can start with that concept. And our students may not be thinking spatially about volume right away, but many of them have been to a concert, or many of them have been into a house where someone had a stereo playing. And if you're in a small room, the volume doesn't need to be very loud. It doesn't need to be very turned up very high. There's not a great volume necessary. But as your room increases, you need more volume. And so as the size of your room increases. And so immediately students can start to make that another type of connection of the idea of the area or space I'm in. As it increases, my volume increases. Now, again, I know as you get to more complicated shapes, you can have shapes where your area stays very small. Your foot area or ground area space stays very small, but your sidewalls grow, and so your volume grows even though your area didn't. But if you get to surface area, it'll always stay true. The two grow together, and it is a nice kind of way to intro to some students into the idea of these relationships, and then make a more specific distinction a little later on. Inequality, I saw someone put imbalance. That's a good way to think of inequality. Also, if you're thinking in, sorry, trying to bring up this chat again. I don't know if y'all see this or not. But also, if you're thinking of inequality, think of relationships where students felt that they got an unequal share of something. I see someone else here putting, my students are always thinking money and pizza. Money and pizza are always great ways to talk to students. Pizza is the classic. Use it for a pie graph and cut things up. But money, man, when money hits, students seem to know they can do math all immediately. It's like they learned it overnight. But in terms of inequality, make them think of the time that they got paid less than someone else for the same job and they felt unequal, or the time that the pizza got shared where they only got 2 slices and everyone else got 3, or and start to think about, then you have to balance the equation to get that to equal out. You can also, if you're in a more of a social studies setting or something, talk about inequalities in society. Some of the things talk about some of the social studies readings talk about inequality and the way the country's founded or the way the country is right now, and you can kind of connect subject areas with that kind of language pretty easily. Fraction, the same kind of thing. A piece of something, you can kind of talk about. There's all sorts of ways. I see lots of people put it in here. Fractions of pizzas are good, which is kind of the obvious one. But think about, again, connecting it to another area of study, like the fraction of a group of people that believe this versus the fraction of a group of people that believe that. And you can even make the connection to, it's not so far from the word faction, so we can kind of expand our conversation a little bit like that too. There's all sorts of ways to do this, and a lot about this webinar is approaching the idea of being open to this kind of connecting the language more and more. If we go on here and look a little bit more, so here we were talking acute and obtuse is a great example of where this starts. Like we were saying, you could talk about a sharp pain or an acute pain, and it being a nice sharp angle, like in our drawing over here. Or you can talk about someone being obtuse. They may not know what that word means quite yet, but this is a good way to make a kind of a roundabout connection. We have an acute angle is a small pointed angle that gives, or it could relate to a sharp, small pointed area of pain, versus the opposite is something that's not sharp, something that's more generalized or slow to understand, we say, because they're not sharp, but it's also an angle that's not sharp. And so we're starting to connect the meaning of the words in the language to the meaning and use of them in math, so that the students are growing, again, just greater depth and knowledge of what they're talking about, instead of this is just what this size angle is named, right? Expanding a little bit more on these ideas, percent is a great place to start talking in with this idea of a quarter too. Percent, I like to break the word into pieces, and our per becomes our divider line, just like miles per hour or revolutions per minute, and our cent relates to 100, obviously. And I ask the students how many pennies are in a dollar, and they say, or how many cents are in a dollar, and they say 100. How many years are in a century, and they say 100. And so they're starting to learn the English and the language of the different pieces, what this root word means, and why we use it in this way. Similarly, you can make the quick leap to talking about the quarter and using it when you're on percent to get right into the idea of the connections between fractions, decimals, and percents. So we talked about a quarter earlier could be a quarter of a football game or a quarter of a basketball game or whatever sport's popular in your area, and that would be 1 out of the 4. And so we could write up our actual 1/4, and then we can ask the students, how do you say that? Oh, we say it a quarter. That's actually how we speak it. Well, then what's a quarter in real life? Because we know they know money, and they say, oh, this 25-cent piece in my hand. And you say, well, how do you write that 25-cent piece in your hand on the board? And it's 0.25. Okay, now 0.25 is a decimal. So how would I say that decimal other than saying 0.25? I would say 25 hundredths because it's to the hundredth place. And so then if I wrote that as 25 hundredths, that becomes 25 over 100, just like in fraction form, which now looks like my percent. I've got my per line. I've got my centuries worth of whatever below it, my 100. And so now I've actually got it in my percent form, and I know that means I can get rid of those and put my official percent sign there. And so we've kind of talked all the way through the 3 while never getting away from a quarter. Now, granted, they're going to have to do more complicated procedures to switch from fractions to decimals to percents with certain numbers, but this gets the idea of how they're connected through with very simple language and simple numbers that they can see, and it also connects it to the language of the real world in terms of a quarter is actually in my pocket, or a quarter of the game is 1 out of 4 of them, or 25% off is a quarter of the price, so I could just divide by 4, those kinds of things. And we can make those discussions, kind of facilitate those discussions a little bit in that way.
Harold, you have some questions in the chat bar.
Okay, that's what I was just looking at. Whoops, I'm moving something instead of the chat. So we do have some questions in the chat. Yeah, inequality, am I thinking no equal as in rights? Yeah, that's the kind of place I would take it. Good comment there. Exactly, and then you start to connect to the social studies room in the reading class and reading general current events type things. Part of a disease, loudness or softness, bias, yeah, those, okay, let's see. Sorry, I'm kind of reading pieces of things here. The percent sign looks like the number 100 with a line in the middle of it. Okay, I like that too. I've never really thought of it that way. But see, this is where this discussion can go, that it does have a line in the middle with 2 zeros, so it looks like 100. You can kind of help that with a visual way to maybe have the students link into what's going on. Also, I like the idea of per means each, as in cookies, and yeah, per means out of 100. Excellent. Oh, here we go. More. Are there more down here, June? I think I'm...
No, that's it. And
okay.
I think there was one in the Q&A.
Okay. Volume, a cereal box class. Ask what item. Yeah, okay. Excellent. So bring a cereal box to class and talk about how it's packaged by weight and not volume. And that's an excellent place to start a discussion with students. Same idea can be done with chips bags, because if you look at the volume, you think there's going to be so many more potato chips in there than there actually happens to be when you pop open the bag and find out that it's packaged by weight. And so that would be a good comparison between weight and volume to bring in some things like that. You can also start right into unit price with those if you have people bring in the prices of what they purchased, and you can compare some things between the ounces in each bag of chips or box of cereal or whatever, and give them an idea of how to figure unit cost in that way, which can be a lot of fun. And then you can tell them you can actually read unit cost in the store, so you don't have to do the math once you're there if you want to be nice. But or you can make them work for it. I think, does that catch up most of them, I think? If not, we'll check back in a second and get with y'all. But thanks, those are some great ideas and questions. Now, a major push in with IPDAY and with the GED testing services and our curriculum frameworks for adult ed have to do with workforce preparation. And so I would suggest that making some connections beyond the classroom into different areas of work can be an excellent way to integrate some of those workforce prep um, goals into your regular classroom. So one example is when you're talking about geometry and measurement, obviously you should be talking about construction. I think a lot of us kind of take that, and that sounds very obvious, but in terms of like drawing little houses and figuring out areas and things like that, and it's a visual structure that we're used to seeing all the time. But there's also interesting little things you can do if you have students that are a little more geared towards it, and just a little bit more advanced. You can use the Pythagorean theorem, for example, to determine if the corner of a wall is square. So if you measure out 3 feet in one direction from the corner and 3 feet in the other direction from the corner, then the angle across the middle ought to be 5 feet, because you get your 3, 4, 5 pattern there. But they can physically see it, and they can look and say, that wall is a corner, it looks like it, but let's measure it and make sure it's precisely a 90-degree angle at that wall. And you can do things like that with it that are very practical, real-world kind of applications if you're building something. You can also discuss pitch, the idea of roof pitch, which gets you into fractions and the idea of slope. A roof pitch is given in terms of the bottom number of your fraction is always 12, and it's like we talk about a 612 or a 912, which would mean that a 612 would be that for every foot in it goes up 6 inches. And similar to a 912, for every foot in it goes up 9 inches. And so it becomes very much your pitch and your slope are similarly found if you're and they relate directly. The only difference is pitch is always given with a base number of 12 because it's in inches, because we're dealing with feet and inches for building. And so you can talk to them very quickly about the idea of how this idea of slope on the coordinate grid actually connects directly to things out in the real world, such as pitch on your roof. And then you can also talk to them about how if your pitch is a 612, you can reduce that into a different slope, but as pitch, we would keep it as a 612 instead of reducing it. But you can reduce it, so all of a sudden you're playing with fractions. Obvious use of tape measures is great to get people physically thinking about how things relate. We also have to use a few tape measures in the GED testing book in there. Converting between units can be really handy. Actually get people out, make them measure some things, and then make them convert, measure 3 feet and convert it to a yard and convert it to inches. And if they're confused, they can actually count out the inches on the tape measure instead of just doing the math. They can physically see it. Again, that's also a great time to talk about metric versus English, and how in certain industries you'll be dealing with metric measures, usually because they are more international industries and such. Do you have a visual regarding reducing pitch? I'm not. Oh, I gotcha. Well, I was just saying in terms of I don't have a visual right now, but if you said you had a 612 pitch, I could actually reduce the fraction and call it, a I guess I could call it a 1/2 pitch, or I call it a 1/2 slope, right? But when I'm talking about it in the construction world, I would always still talk about it as a 612 pitch. So I wouldn't want to reduce it and actually change the pitch of the roof. But maybe a visual is something I could work on for that. That's a great suggestion. Let's see here. Where were we? Okay, perimeter area, volume, and surface area. These are great to talk about as a group, even if you're not ready to do the calculations on the surface area and the volume and things yet. Even if your students are at the very beginning of adding up perimeters, it's nice to intro all of them at once, I think. Often in the classroom, you have a floorboard of some sort, like a kickstop, sometimes around the edge of the room, and you can talk about perimeter with that. You can talk about the area of the carpet or tile on the floor. You can talk about the volume of the air in the room, and you can talk about the surface area of the walls. So all of a sudden you've talked about who installs the floorboard around the edge, carpet guys figuring out the area for their jobs, the heating, ventilation, and air conditioning folks figuring out the volume so they size the AC unit properly, and the painters figuring out how much they need to paint in the room. And if your students are really into it and catching on, you can go beyond that to actually figure out, kind of tell them how you would use those calculations to figure out your cost of the job. So if you were a contractor, you wouldn't lose money, or if you were bidding the job out, if you own the place, you wouldn't be getting overcharged, or you could, those kinds of things. But they all connect very quickly, and the students can kind of see them all as a unit instead of as separate pieces, like we sometimes try and we get stuck thinking about them too separately sometimes, I think. Cooking, again, a lot of people, we're used to talking about cooking directions in terms of grow the size of the recipe for larger serving sizes, and that's really common. But I also think it's great to actually bring in some recipes, and if you have and follow through the directions and talk them through, talk about, okay, now let's as a group raise this up for a different size party. Maybe if you even had the room in the facility, go ahead and follow directions and make some food. I know that sounds a little off the line of math for some people, but a major part of math is following directions and close reading for good problem solving. And so this can kind of get you started in that, because if you don't follow the directions well, you will end up with a pretty bad tasting batch of brownies or cake or whatever it is you're making. And that's not great. So now let's see, what else do I have here? Oh, also we have students that are sometimes interested in healthcare. We have a lot of students that are interested in going into the healthcare industry, a growing industry, obviously. And immediately you can start to connect their math language to their healthcare language. And even if they're not going into healthcare, many of us have been around a hospital or around somebody that had to have an IV for whatever reason, and we've heard them say, "You're getting so many CCs." Well, again, a CC kind of becomes like an Impala. We don't know what it is. It's just a thing that we're getting so many of. But if you talk to the students and kind of tease that out in your math class, it's actually a measurement of volume, and it's a cubic centimeter. So here you're dealing with metrics, the metric system, and volume all in one, and they can get a better idea of what they're looking at here. I have a few more questions here. Let me back up and read them real quick. Oh, excellent. Someone said they've done a lesson where they talk about timesheets and show that if you work 15 minutes over time, but you say 4 hours and you put overtime of over your 4 hours, you would put 4.15 on your timesheet, but that's incorrect because you actually worked 0.25 or a fourth of that next hour. And yeah, that's great, because that's a great lesson. Again, our students know for sure when they've been affected by losing money. They can understand and feel that pain, and as we all can. And at the same time, many of them have never seen a timesheet where they had to enter their time in terms of decimals of an hour before. And so when they do have to do that, they very well might be cheating themselves for a little while there. Definitely. So that's a good example. Okay. Yeah, the math. I got another one here that, yeah, do you like money starts a good conversation about math. Excellent. Okay. And someone else shared some idea about some great books that have some ideas that relate on perimeter and area really well. They'll relate the two together. That's great. I'm sure there is a place on IPDAY where we can share ideas like that. I'm just not sure at the moment where that would be. June, if you want to pop in, is there somewhere where someone could make suggestions about materials that they enjoy using in their classroom?
Are these like links?
Possibly, or it just says they have some great hands-on ideas for certain math books. Have some great ideas, like if they wanted to share what those books were, just like a name.
Yeah, just send them our way and we'll find the location and
Okay.
let you know. It sounds to me like it would be in the links section.
Wonderful. All right, thanks. So if there's something y'all have that you think would really relate and help other teachers with this kind of a topic, please share it. That would be we'd appreciate it. That would be great. All right. So moving on, there's some other ideas and places we can connect. I like this. little despicable cartoon here because it makes me wonder why we write some of the math problems we write in our books. Um, math's the only place where people buy 64 watermelons and no one wonders why. Well, it's very easy to turn our problems into things that are much more connected in real world, and especially in adult education where we have adults that are dealing with numbers, at least in terms of money and finances, on a daily basis. So I like people to bring in. Everybody gets credit card solicitations in the mail, it seems. So get some people to bring those in. You can even go through what some of the deals are, what the interest rates are, what if you put $100 on it in January and didn't pay anything on it for 5 years, how much it would be if you just did very simple annual interest, just to have them get the idea of how that works. And then obviously, if you want, you can go into more complicated approaches. Also, the same thing is true for payday loans. And basically, the idea is to get them to see how things with really, really high interest grow your base number so much more quickly. And that also kind of ties into their idea of multiplication and multiples and things growing exponentially instead of just always thinking of adding stuff together. Tipping's a good example for figuring simple percents. And when I mean simple percents, I'm talking about taking 10% of something and then multiplying it by, if you're going to tip 20%, multiply it by 2, kind of thing. If you're also for this idea, kind of the next thing here, simple percents with shopping. Like you go into the store, there's a $90 item on sale for 30% off. Well, 10% of 90 is easy to get. That's your $9. We can multiply it by 3 to get up to our 30, and then we can take away our 27 to get a basic idea of if I have enough money when I walked in there or not. Now, to keep it simple in your head in real world, go ahead and have them add 10% of that final number back on for tax. Now, I know tax isn't 10%, but then they know for sure they got the money they want to spend. And so it's a very real world application for using percents that later, when they have to apply and use only, find 6% of this, they'll be able to connect it a little better, hopefully, because they've seen how it worked with just 10% numbers in a very simple application. You can extend this again to budgeting. We can talk about fractions or division, or how much money do I get a month, or how much money do I get a week? How much money does that mean I have every day? And even if it comes to that, how much money does it mean I have for my 3 meals every day? It'll start getting students to think about, should they be spending money at Subway for lunch or save that for their dinner meal? And again, it's a way to kind of connect some of these real world issues with how they think about using numbers and money and dividing things equally throughout the month or the week or the day or whatever approach you take there. Again, continuing with this idea, utility bills are great. Have them break it down and figure out what each part of their utility bill actually goes to. They can do some division and add up all the taxes that go in and then divide by the number of kilowatt hours they use to figure out what it actually costs them, as opposed to what they're told it is per kilowatt hour, because those numbers are often a little bit different. It's pretty interesting for students too to find out. A lot of our students don't realize you can get year-long utility, a printout of your bills for the year, and compare kind of your usage in different times of the year. And so all of a sudden you're looking at bar graphs and incorporating that side of things as well. So the main key is getting real world numbers and real world kind of word problems that they can work with instead of just a more generic problem out of a book. Mainly because they're just going to connect with it deeper, because they'll think about it again later. Whether they want to or not, it'll come back in. They'll think about it again later. Okay, a couple other ideas here in the chats. Okay, here are some of the connections for some of the math books and things. We'll make sure those get shared a little later on. Okay, and then talking about renting things. Yeah, so Or, okay, I like this. Taking a problem that does seem a little more practical, because there are books that give us pretty practical problems, but actually have the students change the name of the problem to their own name, which makes it feel a little more connected, and they relate more readily. I like that. That's great. It is a good, simple trick to make them connect better and figure out if they're spending too much money for their rental or those types of things. Excellent. Good ideas here. Thanks for sharing, y'all. Okay. Um, okay, so then again, more connections to this idea. Whoops, sorry, I pressed the wrong button. There we go. More connections to this idea outside of your typical math knowledge area. Um, find out what kind of students you've got in your classroom. What are their interests? And I guarantee you, very easy things to connect math to with that. Um, you know, we got a lot of horse people in North Florida for sure. And, why is a quarter horse called a quarter horse? Well, it's because it races a quarter of a mile. There's a reason for it. It's not a random name. Skateboarders, surfers, where does the name a quarter pipe or a half pipe come from? It's by the shape. And so all of a sudden we're looking at geometry and kind of divisions and quarters and things again, and halves. Baseball and basketball, talk about batting averages or shooting percentages, like free throw averages. Batting averages, people holler it off all day. Oh, he's got a 357 batting average. And everybody's like, that's amazing. Well, tell them it's 0.357 because it's 357 thousandths. And that means he only hits it 357 times out of 1,000, and start to really have it sink in as to what these things are telling them. Similarly, a lot of students are into music. If you've got people that perform or play music, making a connection with notes and rhythm in music specifically is going to suck them in quickly into how fractions are related. A whole note has 4 beats per measure, say, if you're in like 4/4 time, say. So you've got a whole note's 4 beats per measure. A quarter note is just 1 beat, so you have to have 4 of them per the measure. Eighths notes, you need 8. 16th notes, you need 16 to match the same whole note per measure. And so you really get that idea of fractions and breaking those ideas apart that way for a musician, if they're into that already. Now, how do we do this? These are some great ideas, and I think the best way is there's one way to do it: hire teachers that have a wide variety of careers or a series of degrees or a varied background, which I know a lot of people that come to adult ed come from another background beforehand, and so we kind of naturally have a larger group of folks that kind of fit this category than some other professions. I, for one, have a master's of arts in religious studies and a master's of science in kind of renewable technologies degree. And so I have this very unusual way where I feel like I can talk to people on both sides of the math versus non-math kind of divide. And not everyone has to have that complete division, but I think a little bit of something leaning towards that can definitely help. Now, beyond that, teachers also should embrace their hobbies and things to bring into the classroom. Whatever you're interested in, kind of like I said, find out what the students are interested in, connect with them. Well, bring in what you're interested in and connect that with them as well. That can be a lot of fun, and when they see you excited about something, they can get excited about it, think about how math connects to things in their world that they're interested in. Also, I like the idea of trying to challenge teachers to get out of their comfort zone a little bit. We tend to be like, I'm the math teacher, I'm the English teacher, you do that, I'll do this. I'm very, even in a lab setting sometimes, or a one-room classroom kind of setting, we'll be like, oh, just a second, let me get, Julie's great at math, let me get Julie to help you, I'll help you with the grammar problem in a second, or something like that. Try to not always go to the math person, and try not always avoid being helping on a math problem if you feel like your main strong point is not math, because you probably, or at least you should, or at least you could, if you reviewed a little bit, know most of the math that the majority of our adult ed and GED students have to work on. And sometimes by coming at it from a perspective where it's not your best, strongest area, makes it so you explain it a little bit easier to someone who it's not their best, strongest area either. Y'all are both kind of figuring it out together, if you will. Whereas sometimes if someone's too into the math world, they may not be able to explain some of the more very simple techniques to the students. Now, I know this happens rarely, but it's just an idea to encourage things. Also, I'd like to encourage you to establish team teaching practices within your adult ed program. I know there's a lot of discussion at the state level and throughout the country actually about adult ed and team teaching and what we call integrated teaching, where we're connecting our adult ed programs to career and technical programs. And that's scary for a lot of people, but I think a great place to start is working within your program to do some team teaching. Maybe take your English and your math teacher and put them both in the English class and both in the math class. You can do this by expanding the size, like growing the size of the class, and so you're still, it's not like you're doubling teachers per student necessarily, but you're getting a variety of voices in that class. And I know we're focused on math now, but I think similarly, the math teacher might have a outside perspective that can help your English teacher at certain times too. We can all kind of balance off one another there. And just to expand on this a little bit more, we're gonna have another webinar in October about this idea, and it's titled "Team Teaching Within Adult Ed: The Advantages of a Variety of Perspectives, Attitudes, and Teaching Styles." And so, basically, what we're going to be talking about is really what I like to call tag team teaching, which implies essentially less team prep time and more team knowing where each other's skills are and kind of playing off one another's skills, and giving each other their moment in the classroom instead of completely finishing each other's sentences because you've prepped so well. And so on the 12th, we'll talk more about all sorts of ways to approach that and expand that type of a program in your department, in your adult ed program, that kind of a approach in your adult ed program. So lastly, I think the main kind of takeaway here is that, and I think we all know this, and sometimes I feel like it doesn't need to be reiterated, but adult ed teachers kind of need to be ready to use their own unique knowledge base to make these connections between the class and the real world. We have a unique set of students that adult students come in with a different perspective on the classroom and a different perspective about the real world, and sometimes making their learning connect more quickly can make them not only learn the subject matter more deeply and more fully, but can also help them kind of stay with it and see the worth of it beyond just needing a degree to do whatever job they were trying to get or get whatever program they were trying to get into. It, they see the immediate worth just for the knowledge in and of its sake as well. And so I'd like to challenge you to think about other connections that you can. I think we've had a lot of great suggestions in here so far. People are clearly thinking in the right direction. But go ahead and think about how you use math in your daily life. Where do you encounter it the most? Do you have any hobbies you use math in? Also, it's fun to point out common math mistakes. Point out where math matters. Like this little example we have here in the picture, the large sweet tea for $100 is a little pricey for me, but that decimal point sure is important. Let's see. Let me drop back one slide. Someone asked, what was the team for? Sorry, together everyone achieves more. Kind of classic team, and an acronym, and I think it's great. I think it gets to the heart of what we're talking about. Let me see if there's any more questions, but otherwise, I'm just about finished for the day. Excellent. So someone says, as a middle school principal for 15 years, I always had my music teachers teach math as part of their curriculum. That's excellent. That's yeah, that's wonderful. I don't even know what to say. I wish I had music when I was in school. I didn't, but if I had, I would have hoped I had a teacher teaching math in there as well. The idea of letting students show different ways of thinking to solve works well because one way is not always the only way. Very true and correct. And that's why I try and say, with any of these things, make as many connections to the word or the knowledge you're working on as you can, because people will connect in different places. We all have different life experiences. We all have different knowledge we bring to it, and there's definitely different ways to solve most any problem. And whatever way that you may think is right as the teacher, or the book may think is right as the book, may not always be the way that some students see it. And so we need to definitely be open to a variety of options there, and a variety of answers. Let's see. Um, Someone says, we have done lessons on how not paying attention to overcharges on a receipt where a few items were purchased, and how might businesses who may overcharge by pennies or simply a quarter quickly exponentially mount into huge profits, but just and loss in your pocket. Yeah, good idea. The idea of how quickly those things can accumulate. Yes, exactly. Helping build thinking skills, they say, so they can run their own business someday and start thinking about these things. Yeah, I agree. That's a great great point there, to get them thinking about a real world example in a business situation. Yeah, excellent. Someone said, again, touching on the idea of solving things differently, someone said that when they taught in the classroom, they'd go to the board and show how I solved a certain problem, and then ask who solved it differently. An excellent idea. Often I would say, ask if you can get them that are enthusiastic enough, and not concerned about embarrassing themselves in the room. You know, sometimes it takes a few weeks of getting everyone comfortable with knowing each other. Try and ask the student to come do the problem first, and see if any other student did it differently, because simply by being the teacher and doing it, some of them may think, oh, that's the right way, I should have done it like that, even though you're saying it's not and there should be other options. I understand that. It's more of a perception thing. It's kind of like looking through a microscope in science class. If you tell them what they're going to see, they're always going to see that. And if you don't tell them what they're going to see, they may discover something new. You never know. Let's see. Here we go. Yeah, math lessons that generate the most interest. One was buying a car, cash versus loans versus down payments. That's an excellent one, especially if you throw in the idea of those deals where you come in and you walk out with, no money down and $1,000 cash in your pocket. Well, how much is that free, quote unquote, money going to cost you in the long run of paying off when you add it onto the price of the car? Is a good thing too, because those are the kinds of things that definitely quickly suck us in by great advertising without getting us to the truth of the numbers. Okay, also a good idea here, you could have the students do a scavenger hunt on everywhere in their lives they see or have to do math. They could bring all those in and share. Good idea for like some fun homework. Any ideas for students connecting to calculator use, since our students need to use a certain type for the GED test? Yeah, they do have to use a certain type. I would definitely get some of those for your program to work with on the calculator. I know that using the calculator can be a difficult process for some students, like you mentioned here. There are some good resources on the IPDAY site, some good kind of e-trainings and stuff on there. I know we're going to do I think we're going to have a webinar in the near future on that, if I'm not mistaken. I do know, but I also know, and I try and encourage my students, I want them to learn to use the calculator, but not to use it as a crutch. Like, there's certain things that they can definitely do quicker on paper, even though they're allowed to use the calculator. And so I often try and encourage them to, we'll wait for the calculator for a while in class and get them working the problems without that as best we can. For example, even though when they can use a calculator to do fractions, it's so much quicker to do fractions on paper than to do them the funky way you got to type it in there. And it's good to know how to type it in, and it's good to be able to do them on there, but it can slow down some processes. So let's see. Also, sometimes I grab a sports page from the paper. We follow the NFL teams and compute win/loss games using fractions, percents, and decimals. Excellent. As we go through the season, the computations get harder. Yeah, they sure do. That's an excellent way to hook in some of your more sports-minded students. And there's definitely some students that are very intense on following team stats and whatever their sport they're into, but then they think they're not good at math, and they don't like numbers. So it's good to point that out to them, that they do, and they are good at numbers. Yeah, someone said they would love to have an excellent webinar on the calculator for use for the GED. Like I said, I'm pretty sure that's on the horizon. I can't recall the exact date and such though. But yeah, unless anybody has anything they'd like to anything else they'd like to add, I think we're finished. Oh, one other just came up: bowling scores for averages, and then figure a handicap. That's great. The same is true with, if you've got students that happen to golf, which is also good to touch on, because I know there's a crazy golf question in some of the current GED study books that kind of confuses some students. So maybe you should touch on that anyway. Let's see. Yeah, I guess I think we're about done. I'm not seeing too many new questions. Again, banking and purchasing online, someone said, can be helpful. That's true. Kind of connect. Again, that also ties in your digital literacy curriculum framework requirements. This is excellent. Yeah, everyone's got great ideas for how to connect beyond the classroom and hopefully gain a little deeper meaning for our students about the importance of math and the actual knowledge that they're learning in math. So thanks again for tuning in, everybody. June, I don't know if you've got anything else, but I think I'm finished.
Thank you, everyone. We're receiving some really nice comments about your presentation today, Harold. You did a really great job. I think I even figured out some new ways that I could do math a little better. So thank you so much. Any of you, if you have any questions about things that you need and you can't find it on the website, just shoot me an email and I'll respond right back to you very shortly. Thank you so much. It was great having all of you with us today.
Yep. Thanks again. Y'all have a nice day.